Every house, every king, and every battle has its own truth. But there are stories older than crowns, darker than the night, and more dangerous than any blade. They were never written in books. They were whispered to fire, to the trees, and to the dead gods. And today, we dare to uncover one of them. The moon hung low over the riverlands, pale and watchful, as if reluctant to gaze upon the carnage below. Smoke drifted through the chill night air, the last breath of a burned village that would never wake again. Among the ruins, a young squire named Alan Flowers moved carefully through the ashes, his cloak drawn tight, his eyes searching for any sign of life or death. He was scarcely 17, though the war had carved years into his face. His hair was the color of autumn straw, his eyes gray as a winter dawn. Upon his breast he bore no sigil, only a crimson bloom embroidered by hand, a red flower stitched from silk and memory. Alan had been born in the service of House Tully, though his family's name, if it ever truly was Flowers, had long been lost to the river mists. His mother had been a washerwoman at River Run, his father a soldier slain at the Trident. When Lord Eddard Stark had come south to serve as Hand, Alan had sworn to follow the Sons of the North, believing in honor and justice. Yet as the War of 5 Kings spread like wildfire across the land, those words began to sound like the mutterings of fools. Still, he carried the red flower banner, rolled tightly and hidden within his satchel. It was not a sigil known to any house, but rather a token of remembrance, whispered to mark something secret, a lost heir, a buried truth. Some said the red flower belonged to a hidden child of House Tully, spirited away when the war began. Others said it was a symbol of rebellion, a rallying cry for small folk too weary of noble quarrels. Alan did not know which tale to believe. He only knew his mother had died protecting that banner, and that she had told him to take it north, to River Run, and to give it to Lady Catelyn Stark. Now, trudging through the charred bones of the hamlet of Fairmill, he wondered if he would ever reach her. His companions, 3 other squires sworn to River Run, had scattered when Lannister outriders set upon them 2 days past. He had seen Sir Lyn Corbray fall from his horse with an arrow through the throat, and young Herod break his neck in the river crossing. Whether the others lived, he could not guess. The night wind sighed through the reeds. Alan pressed on, guided by the pale glimmer of the river. He thought of River Run, the fortress of red stone and flowing water, and tried to imagine the safety of its walls. Yet he knew too well that even there, war had sunk its claws. He reached a small copse and crouched beneath an oak, unrolling the banner to study it once more. The crimson flower seemed to shimmer in the moonlight, its petals stitched so finely they might have been real. Beneath it, faint words had been sewn in silver thread. For the river's heart. "What heart remains?" Alan whispered, folding the cloth again. A sound startled him, a branch cracking underfoot. He froze, hand on the hilt of his dagger. Out of the mist stepped a tall figure clad in dark mail, helm under one arm. His beard was black streaked with gray, and his eyes held a wary sharpness. He bore no sigil either, but his bearing was that of a knight. "You've lost your way," the man said, his voice low and calm. "I'm bound for River Run," Alan answered cautiously. "I serve Lady Stark." The man's mouth twitched. "Do you now? Then you'd best not linger near Fairmill. Lannisters passed here but a day ago. They left nothing breathing." "I saw," Alan murmured. "Who are you?" "Sir Brynden," the knight replied after a pause. "Brynden Blackwood." Alan's eyes widened. The Blackwoods were bannermen to River Run, though tales said their lands too had been ravaged by war. You fought with the Tullys? I fought with whoever had sense enough to pay, Brynden said dryly. But the gold's gone, and I've had my fill of slaughter. You're better off heading east, boy. The Trident's not safe. I can't, Alan said, clutching his satchel. I carry something meant for Lady Catelyn. Something that must reach her hands alone. Brynden's gaze flicked toward the satchel. A letter? A banner. The knight frowned. A banner won't win this war, lad. No, Alan said, meeting his eyes. But maybe it can end it. For a long moment, the two men stood in silence, the wind whispering through the trees. At last, Brynden sighed and glanced toward the dark horizon. Then you'll need a sword at your back. Come. I've a horse hidden nearby. You'll not make it through Lannister patrols on foot. Alan hesitated, but something in the knight's tone, gruff but not cruel, moved him to trust. Together, they slipped through the woods, keeping to shadow and silence. The night deepened, and the sounds of the ruined village faded behind them. By dawn, they reached an abandoned mill by the river, where Brynden had tethered a sturdy brown mare. He handed Alan a crust of bread and a skin of water. "You'll rest here till nightfall," he said. "Then we ride for the North Road." Alan nodded, too weary to argue. As he ate, he caught the faintest glint of something strange beneath Brynden's mail, a sigil half scratched away, but still visible on his breastplate. It was not the tree of Blackwood, but the flayed man of Bolton. The discovery sent a cold tremor through him. Brynden Blackwood, he realized, might not be who he claimed to be, and the red flower banner, now lying beside him in the dust, might be the only thing standing between him and betrayal. The dawn came sullen and gray, a colorless light creeping over the reeds and the slow-moving river. Alan awoke to the creak of leather and the quiet hiss of a whetstone sliding against steel. Sir Brynden sat upon a broken millstone, sharpening his sword with the patience of one who had done so 1,000 times before. The night's unease had not left Alan. The faint mark of the flayed man, seen beneath the man's mail when he slept, gnawed at his thoughts. He had heard of the Boltons, their treacheries, their cruelty in the north. Yet Brynden's manner did not fit the tales. There was no gloating malice in him, no hunger for torment, only a steady, weary calm, as though his soul were heavy with sins he no longer wished to name. When the knight noticed Alan stir, he nodded once. "Up, lad. We've a long road before us." Alan rose, brushing straw from his cloak. "Where are we bound?" "There's a ford upriver," Brynden said. "The Ruby Ford. We'll cross before nightfall if luck's with us. From there, it's 2 days to River Run." 2 days. It seemed an impossible blessing, but Alan had learned that in these times, hope was the most fragile coin of all. They rode northward along the riverbank, keeping to the lesser paths where the reeds grew high and the mud sucked at the mare's hooves. The air was thick with the scent of rot and smoke. More than once, they passed the remains of a farmhouse burned to its bones, the crows already busy at their grim feast. "War leaves little for the living," Brynden said quietly, as if reading the boy's thoughts. "And too much for the dead." "Do you think Lady Catelyn still holds River Run?" Alan asked. "She does," Brynden said, though his voice carried a note of doubt. "The Lannisters hold the western roads, but River Run's stone and moat have defied worse sieges. She'll not yield easily." They pressed on. By midday, clouds gathered and rain began to fall, thin, persistent, and cold. The path turned to mire beneath their horses. Alan shivered, pulling his cloak close. He dared not ask about the sigil he had seen, To do so might mark him as an enemy, but the question burned behind his teeth. When they paused to rest beneath a stand of birches, Brynden tossed him a small piece of dried meat. "You watch me like a hound watches a thief," the knight said with a faint smirk. Alan stiffened. "You wore a Bolton crest once." Brynden's hand stilled. For a heartbeat, only the patter of rain broke the silence. Then he sighed and leaned back against the tree. "You've keen eyes, boy. Why would a Bolton ride for River Run?" "I don't," Brynden said. "Not anymore. I rode for Rose Bolton once, before he bent the knee to the Lannisters. When I saw what his men did to their own kin, I left." "Deserters are killed," Alan said softly. "Aye," Brynden said with a ghost of a smile. "If they're caught." He tossed the whetstone into the mud and rose. "You may believe what you wish, lad, but I've no love for the bastard of Bolton, nor for his flayed banners. There's honor yet in the Riverlands, even if it lies buried deep." Alan said nothing. The words rang true, yet the unease in his heart did not fade. They traveled until the sky bruised to violet and dusk gathered in the hollows. As they neared the ford, a column of smoke rose on the opposite bank, campfires, many of them. Brynden halted and peered through the gloom. "Soldiers," he murmured. "Could be Fries, could be worse. Stay close." They dismounted, leading the horses through the shallows. The river's chill bit through Alan's boots, numbing his legs. When they reached the far bank, Brynden motioned for silence and crouched low. The campfires ahead burned in a half-circle along the river road. The banners that flapped there in the wind bore the golden lion of House Lannister. Brynden's face hardened. "So, they've moved faster than I thought." "What do we do?" Alan whispered. "Go around them. There's a path through the woods." They turned from the road, slipping into the dark trees. The forest was thick and tangled, the undergrowth slick with rain. As they made their way through, a sudden crack echoed to their left, the unmistakable sound of a snapped branch. Brynden drew his sword in silence. "Riders," he hissed. Before Alan could speak, 3 shapes burst from the trees. Men in red and gold, their blades flashing. Brynden met the first with a swing that sent the soldier's helm spinning from his skull. Alan ducked as another lunged toward him. Instinct drove him. He drew his dagger and plunged it into the man's side. The soldier fell, gasping. Alan stared, trembling, at the blood staining his hands. It was the first man he had ever killed. "Move!" Brynden barked. They fought their way through the last of the scouts, leaving 2 dead and 1 fleeing into the dark. The woods swallowed them again, but the clash of steel would soon draw more. Brynden caught Alan by the shoulder. "You did well, but we must run." They pressed northward through the night until exhaustion claimed them. When they finally stopped, the moon was high, pale and cold above the trees. Alan sat by a trickling brook, washing the blood from his hands. His mind was a blur of fear and disbelief. He had dreamed of being a knight all his life, but not like this. Brynden sat beside him, silent for a time. Then he said, "You carry that banner as if it were a crown. Tell me what it truly means." Alan hesitated, but something in the knight's weary eyes, an understanding born of pain, broke through his fear. "It's said to mark the blood of the Tullys," he said. "My mother told me it was for a lost child, one who was hidden when the war began. She said Lady Catelyn must see it, that it might save the Riverlands." Brynden's brow furrowed. "A lost heir? I've heard whispers of such tales, but I took them for folly." "So did I," Alan admitted. "But she died for it. I mean to honor that." The knight nodded slowly. Then you will, I swear it." The words were simple, but the weight of them settled in the air like a vow. When the dawn came again, they rode west, toward Riverrun's heart. The land was broken and scarred, yet life still stirred. The distant toll of a hammer, the faint song of a lark. And somewhere beyond those gray hills, Lady Catelyn waited, her fate entangled with theirs, though neither yet knew how deep the threads of the red flower truly ran. For behind them, in the shadows of the woods, the last of the Lannister scouts crept from his hiding place, clutching his wounded side. He had seen the boy's banner fall from his satchel as they fled, a banner of crimson silk stitched with silver words, "For the river's heart." And before the next sunrise, that secret would begin to spread. The sun rose sluggish and pale, casting long fingers of gold across the mist-laden fields. Alan and Sir Brynden rode in silence, their horses weary, their faces drawn. They had left the forest behind, entering lands that once teemed with farms and laughter. Now they were a graveyard of fences and scorched thatch. The river ran beside them still, dark and swollen from rain, carrying the ashes of a dozen villages toward the sea. It was the 4th day since they had met, and already the world behind them had changed. Alan could feel it in the air, the tension of pursuit, the whisper of unseen eyes. The Lannisters were not a host to forget their wounded pride. Alan knew that word of the banner would travel fast, perhaps even to Lord Tywin himself. They reached a lonely bridge by midday, built of old stones blackened with moss. Brynden halted there, dismounting to drink from the stream below. His reflection shimmered in the rippling water, dark and uncertain. "The world's gone mad," he said at length. "5 kings at war, and not one worthy of the name." Alan dismounted too. "You think none of them fit to rule?" Bryndon's smile was grim. "King Joffrey's a monster, Stannis a zealot, Renly charming but soft as butter. Balon Greyjoy wants only the sea, and young Robb—" He paused, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Robb Stark's got the wolf's heart, but the boy's too green. The river's full of corpses who believed honor alone could win a war." Alan frowned. "Then what wins it?" "The will to do what others won't." The words hung heavy between them. Brynden looked toward the horizon, where a faint line of smoke rose from a distant keep. "Come," he said. "That stone helm ahead. The garrison's small, but we might find shelter or news." They rode again. By the time they reached the outskirts of Stonehelm, the afternoon had waned to dusk. The keep itself was a squat ruin, its outer walls cracked, its gatehouse scorched from some forgotten battle. Only a handful of men remained, wearing mismatched armor and wary eyes. The sergeant at the gate stopped them. "Travelers?" he asked, his voice rough. "Knights of the Riverlands," Brynden said, flashing a half smile. "Bound for Riverrun, seeking safe passage." The man studied them, gaze lingering on their mud-stained cloaks. "You'll find little safety here. Lannister riders passed not 3 nights past, heading north." "Then they ride for Riverrun," Alan said under his breath. The sergeant spat. "They ride for blood. If you've any sense, you'll turn back." Brynden thanked him and moved on. They made camp in the shell of a burned barn beyond the walls, where the smell of old hay and ash hung thick. Alan sat close to the small fire they built, staring into the flames. He thought of his mother, her soft hands, her tired smile as she had pressed the folded banner into his arms. "Take it north, Alan, to the Lady of Riverrun. She will know what to do." Her words echoed now, fragile and uncertain. What if he failed? What if the red flower meant nothing at all? Brynden must have sensed his doubt. He set down his sword and said, "You wonder why you fight." Alan looked up sharply. I fight for my mother, for her memory. And what would she want for you, lad? Vengeance or peace? Alan hesitated. Peace, I think. But peace won't come unless someone fights for it. Brynden gave a quiet nod. You speak truer than most lords I've known. The knight reached into his cloak and withdrew a small leather pouch. He opened it to reveal a smooth, polished stone carved with a sigil, a black tree on red ground. This once marked me as a sworn man of House Blackwood. I cast it aside when I rode with Bolton, kept it all the same. A man should remember where he came from, even when the road twists dark. He tossed the stone into the fire. Flames licked its surface, then cracked it clean in two. Let the past burn, Brynden murmured. We've work yet to do. They slept little that night. Near dawn, a horn sounded far off to the south, thin but clear. Alan jolted awake. Brynden was already on his feet, sword drawn. Riders, he said, many of them. They fled before the sun was fully risen, riding hard along the northern path. Behind them, faint specks of crimson and gold appeared upon the horizon. Lannister outriders. The chase began. Through fields and shallow streams they ran, mud flying from the hooves. Alan's heart thundered in his chest. Once, an arrow hissed past his ear, embedding itself in the bark of a nearby oak. Brynden wheeled his mare, slashing at a pursuer who drew too close. Blood spattered across the grass. By midday, they reached a ruined sept perched upon a rise overlooking the river. Its roof had long since fallen, its windows hollow and broken. They dismounted and led the horses inside the crumbling walls. We'll rest here, Brynden said, his breath ragged. They've lost our trail for now. Alan nodded, though his limbs trembled with exhaustion. He knelt by the altar, brushing away dust. The faint outlines of the seven still lingered there, carved in weathered stone. He whispered a prayer, to the mother for guidance, to the warrior for strength. Then, as if drawn by instinct, he reached into his satchel and unrolled the red flower banner. The silk caught the light, shimmering like a drop of blood. Brynden turned, watching silently. She said it would save us, Alan murmured, but I don't even know what it truly means. Brynden's gaze softened. Symbols have power, boy, sometimes more than swords. If that flower can give men hope, then it's worth more than any lord's crown. Before Alan could reply, a low voice echoed from the doorway. Hope, the stranger said, stepping into the light, is a dangerous thing to carry in times such as these. Alan froze. A man stood at the entrance, tall, cloaked in tattered Lannister crimson. His face was lean, his eyes the pale green of river glass. Around him trailed two soldiers, each armed and wary. "Who are you?" Brynden demanded, sword in hand. The man smiled faintly. "Sir Edric Marbrand, once of Casterly Rock, now perhaps just another ghost haunting the Riverlands." He looked to the banner in Alan's hands. "You've been careless, boy. That sigil's spoken of in camps from the Trident to the Twins. The red flower of the river's heart, they call it. Half the lords think it hides a lost heir. The other half think it marks a traitor. Either way, it's made you both very interesting." Brynden shifted his stance. "If you've come to claim it, you'll find my steel between you and it." Marbrand chuckled softly. "I've not come to claim it, sir. I've come to warn you. River Run's walls may not stand much longer. The Freys tighten the noose from the east, and the lions come from the west. You'll find only death there." Alan's pulse quickened. "Then what are we to do?" Marbrand's smile faded. "That depends, boy, on whether you wish to save your lady or betray her without knowing it." His words fell like stones into still water, sending ripples through the silence. Bryndon's hand tightened on his sword hilt. "What do you mean?" Marbrand's eyes glinted in the dim light. "There are things moving in the shadows of this war, secrets older than any banner. If you go to Riverrun now, you'll carry more than hope to its gates. You'll carry its doom." The wind howled through the broken sept, scattering ash across the floor. Alan stared at the red flower banner in his hands, the silk trembling like a living thing. And for the first time, he wondered if the burden he carried was not a symbol of salvation at all, but a herald of ruin. For a long moment, none of them spoke. The cold wind that swept through the shattered sept carried only the whisper of the river below. Sir Brendan's sword remained raised, its edge gleaming faintly in the dim light. Alan felt the weight of the banner in his hands like a living heart, pulsing with the dread silence that followed the stranger's words. Marbrand moved no closer. His soldiers stood behind him, tense, wary, eyes darting between Bryndon's blade and the crimson silk. "I've seen men die for less than a rumor," Bryndon said finally, his voice low. "If you mean to make threats, sir, best speak them quickly before I tire of this game." Marbrand shook his head. "No threat, a truth. You think that banner belongs to the Tullys, that it will bring you to Lady Catelyn and win her favor. But I tell you this, the red flower is not the sigil of her house. It was the mark of her betrayal." Alan frowned, confusion and disbelief warring in his chest. "You lie." "Do I?" Marbrand's gaze was steady. "Ask yourself, boy, why would a washerwoman guard such a thing with her life? Why would she die for it? That banner was not made to crown a lost heir. It was made to hide one." Bryndon took a step forward, the point of his sword glinting. "Say what you mean, Lannister." Marbrand's lips curved faintly, though his eyes were hard. Years ago, before the war, there was talk in Casterly Rock of a secret fosterling, a child of noble blood, sent away to the Riverlands under false name. I heard it from men who served Lord Tywin himself. The banner of the red flower was to mark the child's protector, so that when the time came, those who knew might find him again. But when war broke, the plan died, and the child vanished into the flood of corpses and orphans. Now tell me, boy, what name did your mother give you? Alan felt his mouth go dry. Alan Flowers. Flowers, Marbrand said softly. The bastard name of the Reach, not the Riverlands. You've carried that banner not to return it to Lady Stark, but to announce yourself. Bryndon's face darkened. You speak madness. Perhaps, Marbrand allowed, but madness has guided kings before. He turned toward Alan. If you reach Riverrun waving that banner, you won't find a welcome. You'll find the noose. Alan's breath came shallow. His thoughts swirled in chaos. His mother's warnings, her dying plea to protect the banner, her refusal to speak of his father. Could it be true? Was he some hidden pawn in a game older than the war itself? Why tell us this? Bryndon demanded. You gain nothing by it. Marbrand's eyes flicked toward the broken altar. Because once, I too thought my lord's cause just. I've watched children burn for their father's ambitions. If I can spare one fool boy the same fate, then perhaps the gods will forgive me a little. He turned to go, motioning to his men. The Freys are moving south. You'll find no safe road to Riverrun. If you're wise, you'll ride east and vanish into the Vale. Let the flower wither. Wait, Alan called. If what you say is true, who was I meant to be? Marbrand paused in the doorway. The wind tugged at his torn cloak, the crimson fabric fluttering like a wound. Ask your lady when you see her, he said, "if you still dare." Then he was gone, leaving only the whisper of hooves fading into the distance. For a long time, the boy and the knight stood in silence. The fire sputtered low, casting long shadows upon the cracked stones. At last, Brynden sheathed his sword and turned to Alan. "Do not let his words root in you. The Lannisters sow lies as farmers sow wheat." Alan nodded, but his mind was far from calm. The words Hyde one echoed through his thoughts, louder with every breath. That night, sleep eluded him. He dreamt, instead of a hall of red stone, of a woman with auburn hair weeping beside a river. In her arms lay a child, and in his hand a silk banner with a red flower upon it. When dawn came, he woke with a start, heart pounding, the dream fading like mist. Brynden was already saddling the horses. "We ride now," the knight said, "before the Freys come upon us." They broke camp and took the northern trail, following the river through the marshes. The land grew wilder as they went. Great willows drooped over black water. The air hung heavy with the scent of mud and decay. By midday, rain began to fall, cold and steady. Alan rode in silence beside the knight, lost in his thoughts. Every sound, the drip of rain, the creak of the saddle, seemed to whisper secrets he could not quite hear. "Brynden," he said finally, "if it's true, if my mother wasn't who I thought she was, would it change anything?" Brynden kept his eyes on the path ahead. "It would change the tale, perhaps, but not the boy who rides beside me." He glanced at Alan then, his face unreadable. "Blood means little without deeds to honor it. You've shown more courage in a week than most lords show in a lifetime." Alan wanted to believe him, but doubt gnawed still. That night, they found shelter in an old hunter's lodge, half buried by ivy. They lit a small fire and warmed their hands. The roof leaked, and water dripped rhythmically into a puddle near the hearth. As Alan dried his cloak, Brynden spoke softly. "You know, lad, when I left Bolton service, I thought myself free. But no man ever truly escapes his past. We drag it behind us like a chain, pretending it grows lighter. Perhaps that's why I found you, to make peace with what I was." He looked into the flames. "If there's truth in that Lannister's tale, then perhaps you're not just carrying your mother's hope, but her secret shame as well. Either way, the road ahead will test you." Before Alan could answer, a thunderous crack split the night, the door bursting open under a heavy blow. 2 crossbow bolts flew through the air, one striking the wall beside Alan's head, the other glancing off Brynden's shoulder plate. "Down!" the knight roared, drawing his sword. Lannister riders stormed into the lodge, cloaks streaming, faces hard and grim. Alan ducked behind the hearth as steel clashed and sparks flew. Brynden met them head-on, his blade a blur of silver and blood. The confined space turned the fight into chaos. Boots sliding on wet wood, men shouting in fury and fear. Alan snatched a fallen dagger and lunged as one soldier aimed a crossbow at Brynden's back. The blade sank deep into flesh, and the man fell with a strangled cry. When it was over, 3 Lannisters lay dead. Brynden leaned against the wall, bleeding from a shallow cut on his arm. "They found us quicker than I thought," he said, grimacing. "We've little time. Mount up." They fled into the night once more, the rain now a deluge. Behind them, the lodge burned, flames licking through the roof until it collapsed in a shower of sparks. Alan glanced back only once. The fire's glow reflected off the red flower banner that hung from his satchel, its silk shining through the rain like a drop of blood against the darkness. And though he could not say why, he felt that something had shifted within him, that whatever truth lay hidden behind that crimson symbol was drawing nearer. waiting to reveal itself before the war was done. The rain did not cease for 2 days. It came down in cold sheets, drumming upon helm and mail, turning the roads to sucking mire. Alan and Sir Brynden pressed northward regardless, following the winding river that curved like a wounded serpent through the hills. The mare stumbled often, her flanks trembling with exhaustion, yet Brynden urged her on. They dared not stop. The night's ambush had made one thing clear: the Lannisters would not relent. The men who attacked them at the lodge had not been stragglers. They had been trackers, sent with orders. If Sir Edric Marbrand had spoken truth, then the red flower banner had already stirred whispers far and wide. Every noble in the Riverlands would be listening for the boy who bore it. They rode until their cloaks clung to them like second skins. Alan's hands were raw upon the reins, and the banner, wrapped tightly in oiled cloth, hung heavy at his side. The thought of losing it haunted him more than the thought of losing his life. Near dusk on the 3rd day, they came upon a crossroads where the river bent sharply westward. There, standing half sunken in mud, was an inn of cracked timber and fading paint. Its sign, a painted trout leaping from blue water, swayed weakly in the wind. "The Fisherman's Rest," Brynden read aloud, reining in his horse. "We'll shelter here. The horses need it, and so do we." Alan followed him inside. The inn was half empty, the air thick with the smell of damp straw and stale ale. A fire burned low in the hearth, and a few weary travelers sat hunched over their cups. The innkeep, a round man with eyes too sharp for his smile, looked up as they entered. "Travelers from the south, eh?" he asked. "From the storm," Brynden said shortly, tossing a coin upon the counter. "Food in a dry corner." The innkeep nodded and vanished into the kitchen. Alan sank onto a bench near the fire, letting the warmth creep into his bones. Brynden sat across from him, silent as ever, his eyes scanning the room. A pair of men-at-arms dozed in one corner, their gear marked with the sigil of House Derry. At another table sat a cloaked figure, face hidden in shadow, a goblet untouched before him. The man's stillness was unnatural. He neither drank nor moved, only watched. Alan pretended not to notice, though he could feel that gaze upon him like a blade. They ate quickly, stew, coarse bread, and watered wine. When Brynden rose to see to the horses, Alan remained by the hearth, lost in thought. The fire's glow seemed to bring his mother's voice to life again, faint but insistent. "When you reach the lady, tell her the river still bleeds." He had never understood those words. Now they felt like a riddle left for him to solve. A hand touched his shoulder, light but firm. Alan turned to see the cloaked man standing beside him. The stranger's hood had fallen back slightly, revealing the edge of a scar running from his temple to his jaw. His eyes were pale blue, cold and sharp. "You carry the flower," the man said softly. Alan stiffened. "You're mistaken." The stranger smiled thinly. "No, I've seen that banner before, years ago, when I served the late Lord Hostertully. My name is Torrin Pike, once captain of his guards. The red flower was meant for a child born of his blood, hidden from his enemies. If you carry it, boy, then either you are that child, or someone wishes the Riverlands to think you are." Alan's mouth went dry. "What do you want from me?" "To warn you," Torrin said. "There are those who would see you dead before that banner reaches Riverrun. The Freys most of all. They have sent men to every road between here and the Twins. Your name, your face, they will know them soon." Brynden returned at that moment, hand on the hilt of his sword. "Enough whispers," he said. "If you mean us harm, say it plain." "I mean you warning," Torrin replied calmly. River Run will fall within a fortnight. The Lannisters close from the west, the Frys from the east. Lady Catelyn is gone, taken to her son's camp, if the talk is true. If you seek her, you must go north, not west. Brynden studied him for a long moment. And why should we believe a ghost from Lord Hoster's court? Because I have nothing left to gain, Torrhen said quietly. The Tullys are dying, sir. The Riverlands with them. But perhaps that flower means their blood is not yet spent. He rose and turned away, drawing his cloak tight. The night will bring riders. Leave before they come. Then he was gone, vanishing into the rain like smoke. Brynden cursed under his breath. The gods send us more riddles than allies. Alan rose, clutching the banner. We must go, then. They left by the back door, avoiding the main road. The storm had lessened, but thunder still rolled in the distance. As they rode north along the marshy path, Alan glanced over his shoulder once. The inn's windows glowed faintly through the rain, and in one of them he thought he saw Torrhen's face again, watching, waiting. By dawn, they had reached a stretch of low moorland. Mist clung to the earth, and the air smelled of rain and peat. Brynden halted atop a small ridge and pointed eastward. Beyond those hills lies the Green Fork. If the boy spoke true, we can follow it north toward Sigurd. From there, we may yet find word of Lady Catelyn. Alan nodded, though doubt clouded his mind. Too many tales, too many warnings. Yet each step forward felt like a chain tightening around his fate. They made camp beside a cluster of standing stones. The mist curled around them like spirits, muffling every sound. As Brynden slept, Alan drew out the banner once more. The crimson silk shimmered even in the dim light of dawn. For a moment, he thought he saw the faint outline of another mark beneath the stitching, something older, half buried by thread and time. He held it close to the fire and saw, hidden beneath the flower's petals, a faint trace of a sigil long faded, a leaping trout. The banner had once been the standard of House Tully itself. A chill passed through him. His mother had not lied. She had hidden the truth, sewn over it with red silk to disguise its meaning. When Brynden woke, Alan showed him what he had found. The knight's expression darkened as he studied the fabric. So, that's it, he murmured. The red flower hides the trout. The river's heart bleeds red because it was meant to conceal the house it came from. He looked up sharply. You realize what this means? If anyone sees this, they'll think you carry proof of a lost heir of River Run. Every lord with a drop of Tully blood will hunt you, for power, for gold, for fear of what you are. Alan's hands trembled. Then what am I to do? Brynden's gaze softened, but only slightly. What you've done since the start, lad. Keep it safe. Deliver it to Lady Catelyn, if she still lives. He stood, sheathing his sword. We ride for Sigurd at dawn. As Alan watched the mist lift from the moors, he felt the truth settle over him like a shroud. He was no longer merely a squire bearing a dying woman's last wish. He was the keeper of a secret that could shake the Riverlands to its bones. And somewhere, beyond the rising sun, those who feared that secret would already be closing in. The mists clung to the moors like ghosts unwilling to depart, and the morning came pale and silent. The world around Alan seemed hushed, as though holding its breath for what would come next. Brynden moved with the deliberate calm of a man who had lived too long with peril, his armor cleaned, his sword newly oiled. The knight's face bore the hard lines of age and war, yet his eyes burned with the old fire of the Blackwoods. They set out early, the wet earth squelching beneath their horses' hooves. The wind carried the scent of salt and pine from the west. The sea was near, Alan rode behind, clutching the satchel that held the red flower banner. The discovery that the silk hid the leaping trout of House Tully weighed upon him like a curse. It was as though the very blood of River Run pulsed through that folded cloth. They rode without speaking for hours. The road turned rocky, winding through low hills where ruined towers stood like the bones of forgotten giants. Alan's thoughts drifted to the tales he had heard as a boy, of the Trident's glory, of Sir Barristan the Bold, of knights who rode for honor alone. Yet the war had taught him that honor bled easily and dreams died quicker still. By midday, they came upon a village, or what was left of one. The cottages were little more than shells, their roofs caved in, their doors hanging from splintered frames. A single tree stood in the square, its branches heavy with crows. Beneath it hung 3 corpses, soldiers in torn cloaks. One bore the trout of River Run upon his chest, though the sigil had been half burned away. Brynden dismounted, eyes narrowing. "Fries," he muttered. "This is their work. They hang their own to keep the rest in fear." Alan swallowed hard. "We should cut them down." The knight's gaze lingered on the dead. "Aye, the gods deserve better than carrion." He drew his sword and severed the ropes. The bodies fell with dull thuds upon the wet earth. Brynden murmured a prayer to the 7, then turned away. "Remember this, lad. The Freys speak of oaths, but their hearts are cold as stone. Never trust a bridge lord." They left the village behind. By late afternoon, the hills gave way to rolling meadows, though war's shadow lingered even here. A burnt mill stood by a shallow brook, its wheel broken and half sunk. The world seemed stripped of color, only gray skies, brown fields, and the dull glint of rain upon steel. As evening neared, they spotted smoke rising ahead. Brynden motioned for silence. They dismounted and crept forward, crouching behind a line of willows. Beyond lay a small encampment, 6 men around a fire, their armor bearing the silver twin towers of House Frey. Alan felt his heart quicken. "If they find us—" "They won't," Brynden said. "We ride around them, keep to the river." But fate had other plans. As they turned back toward the horses, one of the Frey men rose to fetch water and caught sight of their movement. "Hoy there!" he shouted. "Who's that?" Steel flashed in the firelight. The camp erupted into motion. "Run!" Brynden barked, vaulting into the saddle. Alan followed, spurring his mare into a gallop. The Freys gave chase, shouting curses, their horses crashing through the reeds. Arrows hissed past them, one grazing Alan's arm, another striking Brynden's saddle. They thundered across the river's shallows, spray flying in silver arcs. Behind them, the Frey riders closed the distance, their cries fierce and eager. Brynden wheeled suddenly, his sword gleaming like a shard of moonlight. The first pursuer fell, cut clean from the saddle. "Keep riding!" the knight roared. Alan obeyed, though fear clawed at his chest. He could hear the clash of steel behind him, the screams of men and horses. Then silence, save for the rush of the river. When he turned, Brynden was gone. "Sir Brynden!" he shouted, but only the wind answered. Panic seized him. He reined his horse and rode back toward the shallows. The water churned red in places, bodies floating face down. Among them he saw Brynden's mare, her flank pierced by an arrow, but of the knight himself there was no sign. "Brynden!" Alan called again, voice breaking. A soft groan answered from the bank. Alan leapt from the saddle and ran toward it. Beneath the shadow of a willow lay Sir Brynden, his armor dented, a sword wound glistening darkly across his side. He tried to rise but faltered. "Quiet, lad," he rasped. "No time for mourning yet." Alan dropped beside him. "We must bind it. Stop the bleeding." Brynden caught his wrist. "No. Listen, they'll come again soon." You must ride north. Take the banner, see it delivered. Do not let them have it." "I won't leave you." The knight's grip tightened. "You must. The Riverlands need something to hope for, even if it's only a boy with a banner." He coughed, blood staining his lips. "I've done enough fighting. Let me rest." Tears blurred Alan's sight, but he nodded, his throat too tight for words. He pressed the knight's hand once, then rose, taking the satchel. "Ride fast," Brynden said faintly. "Ride far. And remember, honor is not in the blood, but in the deed." Alan mounted and spurred the horse forward, the world dissolving into rain and tears. He did not look back. By the time the sun fell, he had crossed into the low forests that marked the edge of the Trident's northern reach. The trees loomed close, their branches dripping. His thoughts were a storm, grief, fear, and the hollow ache of loss. Brynden had been the first man to believe in him, and now the knight's voice echoed in his mind like a ghost. He rode until his horse stumbled from weariness. At last he found a cave beneath a cliffside, half hidden by ivy. There he built a small fire, hands trembling, and unrolled the banner. The silk glowed in the flickering light, crimson over silver. The hidden trout seemed to move beneath the red flower, as though alive. Alan stared at it for a long time. "What are you?" he whispered. "A blessing or a curse?" Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. The fire guttered and died, leaving only the faint shimmer of moonlight upon the banner's folds. And in that pale light, Alan thought he saw movement beyond the cave's mouth, a shadow, tall and cloaked, watching. He froze, hand creeping toward his dagger. The figure stepped closer, the glow of the dying embers catching upon his face. It was a woman, cloaked in gray and blue, her eyes dark with sorrow. "Peace, boy," she said softly. "I mean no harm." Her voice carried the cadence of the Riverlands, noble, calm, and filled with hidden grief. "Who are you?" Alan asked. She stepped fully into the light, lowering her hood. Auburn hair framed a face he knew from 100 whispered tales. "I am Catelyn Tully Stark," she said, "and you carry something that belongs to me." Alan could only stare, struck dumb by the truth that had chased him across half the Trident. The banner trembled in his hands as he knelt before her, the red flower gleaming like blood between them. For a long heartbeat, Alan could not move. The rain drummed upon the rocks outside the cave, each drop sounding louder than the thunder itself. Lady Catelyn Stark, once Tully of Riverrun, now the heart of the North's grief, stood before him as though stepped from a dream, or perhaps from the tales of old. Her cloak was torn, her hair damp with mist, but her eyes held the calm fire of a river in flood. She studied him in silence. The flicker of the fire caught upon her face, and in that moment, Alan understood why men called her the strength of Riverrun. "Rise, boy," she said at last. "No need for kneeling, not here." Alan obeyed, though his knees trembled. He clutched the satchel that held the red flower banner, uncertain whether to speak or to simply hand it over. "You've come far," Catelyn said quietly, "and with danger at your heels. I saw the fires to the south last night. Frey's scouts, no doubt. They hunt for something, or someone." "They hunt for me, my lady," Alan said, voice low. "For this." He drew out the banner and unfurled it. The crimson silk caught the firelight, and for a breathless instant, the hidden trout beneath the red flower seemed to shimmer to life. Catelyn's eyes widened slightly. She reached forward, fingertips brushing the silk as though it were a ghost from her past. "I thought it lost," she murmured. "My father had this made when I was but a girl." Alan blinked. "You know it." I do." Her voice softened, touched with sorrow. "Lord Hoster kept it hidden when the war began. It was meant as a promise. The river's heart still beats," he said. "A sign to the bannermen, should the house ever fall into peril. Yet when River Run was first besieged, the banner vanished. I thought it stolen or burned." She lifted her gaze to his, sharp now, assessing. "How came you by it?" Alan told her everything. The ambush at Fairmill, his mother's dying wish, the road through the Trident, Sir Bryndon's aid and sacrifice, and the whispers of Sir Edric Marbrand. He spoke until his throat was raw, and still she listened, neither interrupting nor betraying her thoughts. When he finished, silence fell again. The cave's fire crackled, casting their shadows upon the stone. At length, Catelyn spoke. "Your mother was a brave woman." "She never told me who my father was," Alan said softly. "Only that I must keep the banner safe." Catelyn's gaze lingered upon him. "There is something of River Run in you. Your eyes, they are gray, like the mists upon the Red Fork." She hesitated, then sighed. "There were rumors once that a maid from the castle vanished when I was young. Some said she fled with a guard sworn to my father. Others said she carried a secret she dared not reveal. I never knew the truth." Her eyes darkened. "If what you carry is truly the river's heart, then all who see it will think you are proof of a claim, one that could stir half the Riverlands to rise again. And in these times, such hope is as dangerous as wildfire." Alan lowered his head. "Then what am I to do, my lady? I swore to bring it to you." "You did," she said gently, "and for that you have my thanks. But the banner must not fall into other hands. Too many would use it to sow division. The phrase already whisper of betrayal. The Lannisters would hang you as a pretender. Even Robb, my son, might be forced to see you as a threat." Alan's heart sank. "Then you would have me hide it?" "I would have you guard it," she corrected. "Until the war is done, the Riverlands have no need of symbols. They need survivors." Outside, the wind shifted, carrying faint voices on the night air. Catelyn's head turned sharply. "They've found us." She drew back her cloak to reveal a dagger at her belt. "We cannot stay here." Alan helped her extinguish the fire. Together they led the horses from the cave, mounting in silence. The rain had slowed to a steady drizzle, the forest thick with shadows. They rode north through the trees, keeping to the dark hollows where the light could not reach. Behind them, the echo of hoofbeats rose, a small troop moving fast. Catelyn spurred her horse. "Ride, Alan, to the ridge!" They broke through the tree line and into open ground. The river glimmered faintly below, swollen and swift. Catelyn pointed to a narrow stone bridge spanning the gorge. "Across!" They thundered over the bridge, hooves striking sparks on the wet stone. As they reached the far side, Catelyn dismounted and turned, drawing her dagger. With swift hands, she hacked through the bridge's rope supports. The far half groaned, sagged, and then collapsed into the torrent below, just as the Frey riders appeared on the opposite bank. Their leader, broad-shouldered, wrapped in a soaked gray cloak, shouted across the roar of water, "Lady Stark, yield the boy and the banner, and you may yet live." Catelyn's answer was cold as the river. "Tell Lord Frey the Tullys yield to no traitors." Arrows flew, but fell short. The riders cursed and turned back toward the woods. Catelyn watched them vanish, then leaned against the railing, her breath ragged. "That will delay them, but not for long. They'll find another crossing." Alan dismounted and stood beside her. "You saved us." She smiled faintly, weary and sad. "I have lost too much already." I will not see another child die for a cause he does not understand. They camped that night in the shelter of an old oak. The storm had passed, and the stars shone faintly through torn clouds. Catelyn sat by the embers of a small fire, staring into the flames. Alan hesitated, then said, "If this banner brings danger to all who know it, why not destroy it?" She looked at him then, her gaze distant. "Because symbols are more than cloth, Alan. They are memory, and memory cannot be burned away. My father believed the river's heart would endure, no matter how the world broke around it. I would not see his faith lost." She reached for the banner, running her fingers over the red petals. "Keep it hidden, keep it safe, and if ever the Riverlands have no other light, then let this be the one they follow." Alan bowed his head. "I swear it." Before dawn, they parted ways. Catelyn rode west toward the twins, intent on finding her son's camp. Alan turned east, bound for Seaguard and safety. They exchanged no farewell, only a glance, one heavy with unspoken understanding. As he rode into the pale morning, Alan felt the weight of her words settle deep within him. The banner, folded and bound at his side, seemed to hum softly, as if aware of its own power. He looked back once. Catelyn Stark was already gone, swallowed by the mist. The river whispered below, carrying the memory of all that had been lost, and all that might yet be reclaimed. And though he could not know it, far to the south, in the halls of the twins, a raven already carried word of a boy bearing a red flower banner, a supposed heir to the Riverlands. The game had begun again, and Alan Flowers was its newest piece. The morning broke clear and cold, the sky streaked with pale gold as Alan rode eastward. The land unrolled before him in long green slopes and misty woods, quiet save for the river's endless murmur to his right. The banner hung tightly bound at his side, hidden beneath his cloak. He could almost feel its presence, a pulse against his ribs, like a second heart. He had not slept. The memory of Lady Catelyn's face, tired yet resolute, lingered in his mind. He had wanted to ride beside her, to serve her as he had promised Sir Brynden he would, but she had commanded otherwise. Her parting words echoed with each hoofbeat. "Guard it. When the Riverlands are ready, the heart will call again." Alan did not yet understand what that meant, but he had sworn to obey. He kept to the lesser paths, avoiding villages and bridges. Smoke rose from distant farms, but where there was smoke, there were soldiers. Lannister, Frey, or worse. Once, he glimpsed a band of ragged men-at-arms stripping corpses by the roadside. They laughed as they worked, their armor mismatched, their blades dull with old blood. The war had turned the Riverlands into a feast for carrion crows. At dusk, he came upon a shrine by the roadside. 7 weathered stones stood in a ring, their faces worn by wind and rain. He dismounted and knelt, offering a silent prayer to the father for guidance, to the warrior for courage, and to the mother, for his mother, long buried by the river she had loved. When he rose, he found he was not alone. A man leaned against a nearby tree, watching him with a faint smile. His cloak was dark green, his boots travel-worn, his beard shot through with gray. "You've no need to pray to the gods for courage, lad," the man said mildly. "You've already more than most men twice your age." Alan tensed. "Who are you?" "Just a traveler," the man said, spreading his hands. "Like yourself. Name's Hallis. I came from Salt Pans, though there's little left there now." Alan's hand rested on his dagger. "If you're after coin, I have none." Hallis laughed softly. "Coin? Gods no. Only a fool would carry gold through these parts. I seek food, shelter, maybe a fire to share." There was something calm about his manner, something that eased Alan's instinct to flee. He nodded slowly. "There's a stream ahead. We can make camp there." They rode together as twilight deepened. The stranger spoke little, and when he did, his words were careful, deliberate. He asked no questions of Alan's errand, nor of the satchel he kept so close. They made a small fire beneath an overhanging rock. Hallis shared a pouch of dried fruit and a skin of wine, for which Alan was grateful. As they ate, the older man studied him across the flames. "You've the look of river run about you," Hallis said. "Not just the clothes you're bearing." "Tully folk stand straight, even when beaten. Are you bound there?" Alan hesitated, then shook his head. "No, river run's not safe." "So I've heard," Hallis murmured. "The Freys spread their nets wide these days. Still, the river runs red, they say, and where the river bleeds, vengeance follows." He leaned back, gazing into the firelight. "Do you know the tale of the river's heart, boy?" Alan froze. "I've heard whispers." "Then you've heard lies," Hallis said quietly. "The truth's older than this war. Long ago, when the Tullys first took River Run, their lord swore an oath before the gods that his blood would always rise to defend the Riverlands. When the river runs red, he said, my house shall bleed with it. The red flower was their token, a promise that even in ruin, the river's heart would endure. But the flower was lost, and with it, the old vows faded." Alan's pulse quickened. "How do you know this?" Hallis smiled faintly. "Because I served that house once, as a scribe. I copied those words in ink before the sept burned." Alan looked down at the satchel by his knee. Could it be the same symbol? The same vow his mother had died to protect? Before he could ask more, a rustle in the trees broke the stillness. Hallis was on his feet in an instant, hand to his sword. "Riders," he hissed. "2, maybe 3. They doused the fire and drew back into the shadows. The riders emerged from the mist moments later. 3 men in the Frey colors, weary but armed. One dismounted, scanning the ground. "Smoke," he muttered. They were here. Alan's heart thudded in his chest. The men began to move toward the rocks. Hallis caught Alan's eye and pointed toward the horses. "Go," his gesture said. "Now." Alan hesitated. He could not leave the man who had shared his fire, but Hallis's gaze was hard. With a nod, Alan slipped away through the undergrowth, leading his mare by the reins. He heard the first clash of steel before he was out of sight. Then shouts, a cry, silence. Alan bit down on his grief and forced himself onward. By dawn, he was miles away. He rode through fog until his horse could go no farther, then walked beside her, every step heavy with guilt. He camped that night in the shelter of an old willow by the river. The sky had cleared, and the stars shimmered like shards of ice. Alan unrolled the banner, running his fingers over the silk. The red flower seemed to glow faintly in the starlight, its petals shifting as though moved by unseen current. He thought of Hallis's tale, the vow of the river's heart, and of Lady Catelyn's words. If the banner truly carried that promise, then perhaps it was not just a relic, but a call, a pledge that the Riverlands would not die quietly beneath the weight of Lannister gold and Frey treachery. He drew the banner around his shoulders, a cloak of red and silver. For the first time, he felt its warmth. The next morning, he turned north once more. The land rose into gentle hills, and beyond them he could see the faint gleam of Sea Guard's towers in the distance. The air smelled of salt and seaweed, carried from the western shore. But as he neared the road, he saw riders cresting the ridge ahead, 4 of them, armored and bearing no banners. Not Freys, not Lannisters. One raised a hand. "You there! Halt!" Alan did not move. His mind raced. The leader's armor bore the faint mark of a silver eagle, the sigil of House Mallister of Sigurd. He raised his hand slowly. "I mean no harm." The leader, a woman with cropped hair and a scar along her cheek, dismounted and studied him. "You're far from home, boy. What's your business in Seagard?" "I seek refuge," Alan said. "I've been hunted by Freys and lions both." Her eyes narrowed. "And what's in that satchel you guard so closely?" Alan hesitated. Lies would not serve him now. "Hope," he said simply. The woman's expression softened, almost imperceptibly. "Then you'll find little of it here," she murmured. "But come. Lord Mallister will want to hear your tale." And so, as the sun sank over the western sea, Alan rode beneath the silver eagles of Seagard, the red flower banner hidden once more beneath his cloak, unaware that within those stone walls his arrival would stir the embers of rebellion once thought dead. For the river's heart, though buried deep, had begun to beat again. The walls of Seagard rose from the mist like the ribs of a giant beast, black stone gleaming wet beneath the morning sun. The great keep loomed above the harbor, its towers sharp and cold against the pale sky. Seagulls cried overhead, and the scent of salt filled the air. Alan rode beneath the silver eagles of House Mallister, his cloak heavy with rain, his satchel bound tightly at his side. The woman who had found him, Sir Gwyneth, she had named herself, led him through the gates. Her soldiers followed in silence, their faces drawn, their eyes wary. The war had reached even here. The docks were lined with half-burned ships, their masts blackened, sails tattered. Refugees huddled near the wharves, faces hollow, their homes long lost to fire and sword. Inside the great hall, the air was thick with smoke from the hearths. Lord Jason Mallister sat upon a high seat of carved oak, his silver hair gleaming in the firelight. His eyes, pale as winter steel, studied Alan with the practiced patience of a man long accustomed to hearing desperate tales. "Sir Gwyneth tells me you came from the east," Lord Mallister said. His voice was calm, but there was a weight to it. "And that you've been hunted by both Freys and lions. Few men can claim that and live." Alan bowed his head. "I am no man of war, my lord, only a squire. I served at River Run once." Mallister's gaze sharpened. "Then you serve my liege, or did. What errand brings you here?" Alan hesitated, glancing toward the knights gathered along the hall, grim faces beneath the banners of Seagard. He could not speak openly of the banner before them all. Not yet. "I carry something for Lady Catelyn Stark," he said carefully. "She bade me guard it with my life." A murmur rippled through the hall. Mallister's brow furrowed. "Lady Stark was last seen riding toward the twins. If she sent you here, she must have had reason." "She said the Riverlands were not yet broken," Alan replied softly, "that their heart still beats." At that, Lord Mallister's expression changed. His eyes flicked to Sir Gwyneth, who gave a faint nod. "Leave us," he said to the others. When the hall had emptied, he rose from his seat and approached Alan. "Show me what you carry." Alan drew out the bundle from beneath his cloak. The silk gleamed crimson as he unfolded it, and the hidden trout of River Run shimmered faintly beneath the red flower. Mallister stared for a long moment, his breath caught. "By the gods!" He reached out, but did not touch it. "I have not seen this since I was a boy. Lord Hoster raised it at the Trident before the rebellion. The river's heart, he called it. A promise to his bannermen that the river would never yield." He looked up sharply. "Where did you find it?" Alan told him, though not all. He spoke of his mother's dying wish, of Sir Bryndon's aid, of Catelyn Stark's command, but said nothing of the whispers that tied his blood to the Tully line. When he finished, Mallister sighed. "You've crossed half the Riverlands with every enemy at your back, bearing a banner most men thought lost to history. The gods must have reason for it." He studied Alan anew. "Do you know what this means? The river's heart is a rallying cry. To raise it is to call every house loyal to Riverrun back to arms. Frey, Lannister, Bolton, they would all hunt you for that reason alone." "I know," Alan said quietly. "Lady Catelyn told me to keep it safe, nothing more." Mallister's gaze softened. "You are wise beyond your years. Still, if what you say is true, you cannot linger here. Seaguard stands with the north, but we are beset on every side. I can give you shelter, food, perhaps a ship north, but not safety." "I don't need safety, my lord," Alan said. "Only purpose." At that, Mallister's mouth curved in a faint smile. "Then perhaps there's more of Riverrun in you than you know." He summoned a map from the table and unrolled it. "Listen well. Frey patrols guard every road to the east. But the coast, the coast still holds secrets. There is a hidden cove north of salt pans, used by smugglers since my grandsire's day. If you can reach it, there's a ship waiting, the Mermaid's Tear. She sails for White Harbor under cover of night. The north is safer ground now, for those who serve Lady Stark's cause." Alan studied the map. "It's a long road." "Longer than you think," Mallister said grimly. "But I will send a guide. Gwyneth will see you as far as the hills beyond Maidenpool. From there, you're on your own." That night, Alan lay in a small chamber overlooking the sea. The surf crashed against the rocks below, steady as a heartbeat. He could not sleep. Every sound, the cry of gulls, the whisper of wind through the shutters, seemed to speak of paths yet untaken. He thought of Bryndon's final words. "Honor is not in the blood, but in the deed." He wondered if the night had known what lay hidden beneath the red silk, or if fate had chosen him by chance. Before dawn, Sir Gwyneth came for him. She wore travel leathers and bore 2 swords across her back. "We ride light," she said. "No banners, no torches. Lord Mallister's men will see to your horse." They left Seaguard as the first light touched the horizon. The road ran east along the coast, where the land sloped into low, wind-swept meadows. The sea's roar followed them, constant and wild. For 2 days they rode without rest. Once, they passed a burned village, its wells filled with ash, its fields stripped bare. Alan saw the bodies of children among the ruins and turned away, his stomach twisting. "Frey work," Gwyneth said darkly. "They claim loyalty to the Lannisters now, but they've no honor left in them. Remember that." On the 3rd night, as they neared the hills of Maidenpool, they made camp beside a narrow stream. The moon hung full above them, silvering the grass. Gwyneth cleaned her sword by the fire, her movements precise, practiced. "You're quiet," she said after a while. Alan stared into the flames. "I keep thinking of the men who've died for this banner. My mother, Sir Bryndon. Even Lady Stark rides into danger for it. What if it brings only more death?" Gwyneth paused, then sheathed her blade. "All symbols bring death, boy. Crowns, swords, banners. But they also give men reason to fight, and sometimes reason is all that keeps the river flowing." Her eyes caught the firelight, bright as steel. The river's heart is more than a sign of blood. It's defiance. So long as it flies, the Riverlands are not broken. Alan nodded slowly. The words settled into him like a seed. At dawn, they mounted again. Ahead lay the forested hills that marked the edge of Frey and Lannister patrols. Beyond them waited the hidden cove and, perhaps, freedom. But even as they rode into the rising sun, a chill ran through Alan's heart. He could not shake the feeling that every road he took drew the world tighter around him, that the banner he bore, once meant as hope, was becoming a beacon that could no longer be hidden. And somewhere beyond the horizon, the War of Kings still raged, its tides shifting like the sea. The river's heart, once lost, was stirring again, and with it, the fate of every man and woman bound to the waters of the Trident. The dawn broke cold and gray, spilling thin light across the coastal hills as Alan and Sir Gwyneth pressed onward. The air smelled of salt and wild thyme, the distant cry of gulls carried on the wind. They had ridden through the night, avoiding the main roads, keeping always to the narrow deer paths and forgotten tracks that wound between the sea and the forest. The riverlands lay behind them now, half drowned and bleeding, its fields turned to graveyards. But Alan could not shake the feeling that the river still ran within him. The banner weighed at his side, wrapped tightly in cloth and leather. Sometimes he fancied he could feel it thrumming faintly, as though a heartbeat pulsed within its silk. Sir Gwyneth rode ahead, her posture straight, her eyes ever moving. She was not a woman of many words, but her silence was steadying. Alan had come to trust it, the way one trusts a blade honed sharp, not for its kindness, but for its certainty. By midday, they reached a rise overlooking the bay. The sea stretched vast and gray beneath the low clouds, and upon the horizon lay a scatter of sails, ships moving north, too far to tell their banners. Alan reined in his horse beside Gwyneth. "Freys?" he asked. She squinted against the light. "No, the Freys are land rats. Those are traders, or smugglers. The waters near salt pans are crawling with both. Best keep to the cliffs." They rode down through a valley where the grass grew thick and silver in the wind. The land grew wilder here. Thorn bushes and jagged stones lined their path. They saw no signs of life, save for the bones of an old windmill, its sails broken, its shadow long upon the plain. That night they camped near a grove of pines. The firelight threw long shadows upon the ground, and the sound of the waves far below was like a whispering in the dark. Alan ate little, his thoughts heavy. "You should sleep," Gwyneth said, rolling her cloak tighter about her shoulders. He stared into the flames. "I dream too much when I sleep." Her lips twitched in the faintest smile. "Then you're still young. Old soldiers dream only of silence." Alan hesitated. "Do you ever wonder what it's all for? The banners, the wars, the vows?" She poked the fire with a stick, sending up a spray of sparks. "Once, but not now. I've learned that men die for their lords, their loves, their pride, but rarely for themselves. The trick is finding something worth dying for that isn't just someone else's dream." Alan looked at the satchel resting by his feet. "And if that dream belongs to a house already drowned in blood, then perhaps it's time for someone new to carry it," she said simply. The fire crackled between them. Neither spoke again until dawn. When the first light touched the sea, they broke camp and rode north along the cliffs. The wind had turned fierce, whipping their cloaks, and gulls screamed overhead. Below them, the surf hammered the rocks with endless fury. By midday, they saw smoke on the horizon. Not the gentle white of hearth fires, but black, thick, and rising fast. "Salt pans," Gwyneth said grimly, "or what's left of it." They reached the outskirts by dusk. The town was a ruin of ash and char. The docks had been torn apart, ships burned where they lay. The smell of smoke and salt and rot hung heavy in the air. A few bodies lay where they had fallen, faces half hidden by cinders. Alan swallowed hard. Who did this? The Ironborn, Gwyneth said. They struck here months past, raiding up the coast. The Freys claimed they'd drive them out, but they never came. Now it's left for the gulls. They passed through the ruins in silence. Amid the wreckage, Alan saw a child's wooden horse, blackened and broken, lying beside a shattered door. He thought of his mother then, of her gentle hands washing blood from the steps of River Run, and something in him ached. At the far edge of the town, Gwyneth dismounted. She pointed toward a narrow path that wound down to the shore. The cove lies there, beyond the cliffs. We'll reach it before nightfall. Alan nodded, his heart heavy. And you? Will you sail with me? Gwyneth shook her head. My place is here. Lord Mallister still needs eyes in the Riverlands. You'll go north, White Harbor, if the gods are kind. Seek out Lady Catelyn if she lives, or her son if she does not. He wanted to protest, but she cut him off with a raised hand. You've done more than most lords' sons would dare, boy. Keep the banner close, and remember, what you carry isn't just silk. It's what's left of every oath ever sworn beside these rivers. Alan swallowed hard and clasped her arm. Thank you, sir. Her eyes softened, though only a little. Ride fast. The world is not kind to dreamers. They parted at the edge of the cliffs. Alan watched her ride away until the mist swallowed her, then turned toward the sea. The path down to the cove was steep and treacherous, the rocks slick with spray. By the time he reached the shore, dusk had fallen. The tide hissed against the stones, and the air was sharp with salt. There, moored in the shallows, lay a single ship, a narrow, weathered craft, her sails furled, her hull dark against the water. Lanterns burned faintly along her deck. A figure stood near the prow, cloaked against the wind. Alan approached warily. Are you the mermaid's tear? The figure turned. It was a woman, tall and sharp-eyed, her hair bound in a braid of seaweed and cord. Aye, she said, and you must be Lord Mallister's ghost. I was told to expect a boy with a red heart and death on his heels. I'm only Alan, he said, startled. Then Alan you'll be, she replied with a grin. Come aboard. The tide won't wait. He climbed the rope ladder, the ship rocking gently beneath him. The crew moved like shadows, silent, efficient. Within moments, the lines were cast, and the vessel slid from the cove into open sea. As the coast fell away behind him, Alan stood at the stern, clutching the railing. The wind tore at his cloak, but he did not turn from the sight of the fading land. The Riverlands lay far behind now, shrouded in mist and memory. Somewhere beyond the horizon, a new war waited. The captain came to stand beside him. North, is it? Yes, Alan said. To White Harbor. She nodded. Then north we'll go. But take heed, boy. The sea keeps her own counsel, and not all who flee the river find safe shores. Alan met her gaze. I've no wish for safety, he said quietly. Only a chance to keep the river's heart beating. The captain smiled faintly. Then you may yet outlive us all. The ship sailed on through the darkening sea, its lanterns flickering like stars. Alan drew the banner from his satchel and unrolled it once more. The red flower shimmered against the wind, and for a moment, just a moment, he imagined he heard the faint rush of the Trident's waters, endless and unbroken. He tied the banner to the rail, letting it fly beside the ship's sails. The river's heart, reborn upon the sea. And as the mermaid's tear cut through the waves toward the far north, Alan felt a strange peace settle within him, a quiet resolve that whatever storms might come, He would face them as his mother had taught him, not as a lord nor as a knight, but as a son of the river, carrying hope where none remained. The sea was a living thing. For 7 days and 7 nights, it heaved and sighed beneath the mermaid's tear, its endless song rising and falling like the breath of the gods themselves. The wind bit sharp, the salt stung Alan's eyes, and the cries of the gulls followed them like echoes of another world. He had never seen the ocean before leaving the Riverlands. It frightened and humbled him in equal measure. The ship was small but swift, her crew hardened men and women who spoke little and worked much. The captain, Lyra Seasmoke, they called her, moved among them like a blade of the same steel as the sea, sharp and sure. She seldom smiled, but she treated Alan fairly and demanded nothing of him but silence and strength of heart. He gave her both. Each dawn, Alan climbed the foredeck to watch the sun rise from the waves, the banner of the red flower fluttering beside him. The crew called it the blood flag, for the way it shone in the dawn light. Some whispered it brought storms. Others said it was luck itself. Alan did not tell them its true name. Let them think what they wished. Better superstition than truth. They sailed north by northeast, hugging the coast where cliffs rose dark and sheer. At night, Alan saw the faint glow of burning towns far inland, Freys or Lannisters, he could not tell. Once, they passed the shattered hull of another ship, its mast splintered, corpses tangled in the rigging. The sea did not care whose banners they bore. On the 8th day, a storm found them. It came like a beast from the deep, black clouds rolling, thunder growling low. The crew scrambled to furl the sails, shouting over the wind. Alan tried to help, hauling ropes until his palms bled, but the storm only laughed at them. Waves rose higher than the masts, crashing over the deck. "Hold fast!" Lyra's voice cut through the gale. She stood at the helm, soaked to the bone, her eyes alight with defiance. "She'll not take us yet!" Lightning split the sky. For an instant, Alan saw the sea in all its fury, a wall of white and green, the ship's bow plunging into darkness. He gripped the rail with both hands, praying to every god he knew. Then, through the chaos, he saw the banner. It had torn free from the rail and now whipped wildly in the storm, its crimson silk thrashing like a living heart. The wind threatened to rip it away. Without thinking, Alan lunged for it. "Alan!" someone shouted, but he did not stop. He reached the mast, seized the banner just as a wave crashed over him, cold and merciless. The world turned to salt and sound. He was lifted, thrown, then darkness. When he came to, he was lying against the mainmast, half drowned, coughing seawater. The storm still howled, but the ship yet lived. The banner was clutched in his hand, soaked but unbroken. Lyra knelt beside him, a cut bleeding down her cheek. "You fool boy," she said, half laughter, half wrath. "The sea loves brave men only because she can drown them." He smiled weakly, couldn't let it go. She shook her head, but her voice softened. "Then you've the river in you after all." By morning, the storm had passed. The sky was a wash of blue and gold, the sea calm as glass. The crew moved about in weary silence, mending torn lines, counting the dead. 2 sailors had been lost to the waves. Their bodies were consigned to the deep, wrapped in sailcloth. Alan whispered a prayer as they sank, their faces vanishing beneath the silver surface. They sailed on. Days passed, and the air grew colder. Gulls gave way to dark-winged ravens that circled high above, their cries harsh and strange. The coastline shifted. Where once were meadows and rivers, now stood cliffs crowned with pine and mist. Lyra pointed northward. "The Bight," she said. "Beyond those waters lies White Harbor. If the gods are kind, we'll see her towers by tomorrow. But the gods of this world were seldom kind." That night, a ship appeared on the horizon, sleek, black-sailed, gliding swift as a shadow. "Warship!" the lookout cried. "Closing fast!" Lyra cursed. "Ironborn!" Alan's stomach turned to stone. The Ironborn, raiders from the Western Isles, pirates who worshipped the drowned god and feared no blade. "They'll catch us before dawn," a sailor warned. "Not if I drown them first," Lyra snapped. "To your stations!" The mermaid's tear flew before the wind, her sails straining, the crew working in silence save for the creak of ropes and the slap of waves. But the iron-born ship gained steadily, her oars cutting through the sea like knives. "Ready the ballista!" Lyra shouted. A single bolt flew, trailing fire, but the iron-born were too quick. The bolt struck harmlessly against their prow. In answer, they loosed a grappling line that caught the tier's rail. The two ships slammed together with a crash of splintering wood. Ironborn poured across the gap, bare-chested, their arms tattooed with krakens, their axes dripping salt. Alan drew his dagger and found himself face to face with one of them, a man with teeth filed to points. The raider grinned and swung. Alan ducked beneath the blow and drove his blade upward. Warm blood spattered his hand. The deck became chaos. Steel clashed against steel. Men screamed. The sea hissed red. Lyra fought at the helm like a fury, her curved sword flashing. Alan turned toward the mast. The banner still hung there, fluttering above the carnage. An ironborn seized it, laughing. "A pretty rag for my wife." Rage flared hot in Alan's chest. He lunged, tackling the man. They fell together against the rail. The raider's axe struck the wood beside his head. Alan drove his dagger into the man's neck. The ironborn toppled backward, over the side, vanishing beneath the waves. But the ship was breaking apart. Another volley of fire struck their hull, and smoke filled the air. "Abandon ship!" Lyra shouted. "To the boats!" Alan searched the deck through the haze. The crew was fleeing, their cries lost in the roar of the burning sails. He spotted Lyra near the stern, her arm bleeding, her eyes wild. "Go, boy," she shouted. "Take it and run." He hesitated only a heartbeat, then tore the banner free and leapt into the sea. The water closed over him, cold and crushing. When he surfaced, gasping, the mermaid's tier was already ablaze, her masts collapsing in a storm of sparks. He kicked hard, clutching the banner, his limbs trembling. The waves pushed him toward the dark line of shore. Behind him, the iron-born ship drifted, its sails torn, its prey lost to the deep. Hours later, he crawled onto a rocky beach, half dead with cold. The moon shone through ragged clouds, silvering the foam. The banner lay across his chest, heavy with seawater. He closed his eyes, listening to the sound of the waves. They no longer frightened him. The sea had tested him and found him unyielding. When he woke, dawn was breaking and gulls wheeled overhead. The coast stretched wild and empty, pines whispering in the wind. Far inland, beyond the hills, he saw smoke rising from a distant holdfast. Alan rose, shivering, and gathered his strength. The banner, though tattered, still shone red in the morning light. He slung it across his shoulder and turned north. White Harbor awaited, and whatever destiny the river's heart had yet to claim. The morning sun burned weakly through a curtain of fog as Alan trudged north along the coast. His clothes were stiff with salt, his limbs heavy from the sea's embrace. The banner he bore was wrapped tight in oilskin, slung over his shoulder like a sacred burden. The storm had scoured him of fear, but left him hollow, a boy who had seen too much death and yet refused to die. The air here was colder, the wind sharper. He could smell pine and distant smoke, hear the faint cry of gulls circling far overhead. The coast was jagged and wild, cliffs falling sheer into the churning gray water, stretches of beach littered with driftwood and the bones of ships. By midday, he found a stream cutting down from the hills. He knelt to drink, the icy water biting his tongue. When he looked up, movement caught his eye. A rider cresting the ridge to the east, followed by two more. The gleam of steel flashed in the pale light. Alan's heart lurched. He rose swiftly, retreating into the shelter of a copse. The riders drew closer, 3 in all, armored in dull gray and green. Their cloaks bore a sigil he did not know. A white tree beneath a crescent moon. Northern men, perhaps, sworn to House Manderley of White Harbor. He waited until they were near, then stepped out, hands raised. "Hold! I mean no harm." The lead rider reined in sharply. His beard was streaked with frost, his eyes hard and narrow. "Who goes there?" "My name is Alan," he said. "I come from the Riverlands. I seek White Harbor." "Are you of Lord Manderley's men?" The man studied him a moment, then nodded. "Aye. Sir Jorah Harl, these are troubled times, boy. Few strangers walk this road without reason." "I have reason enough," Alan said. "I carry something for the North, for the Lady Catelyn Stark." At that name, the men exchanged glances. Jorah dismounted. "The Lady Stark is said to be dead," he said grimly. "Killed at the Twins with half her son's host. The Red Wedding, they call it." The words struck Alan like a blade. "Dead?" The knight's gaze softened. "Aye, the phrase did the deed. No man yet knows if her body was ever found." For a long moment, Alan could not speak. He felt the world tilt beneath him, the long road, the blood and loss, all for nothing. He sank to one knee, his breath shaking. The banner suddenly seemed heavier than the sea itself. I saw her," he whispered. "She lived, not long ago. She told me to guard this." "What is it you carry?" Sir Jorah asked. Alan hesitated. Every instinct screamed to protect it, to keep the secret close. Yet despair loosened his tongue. He unwrapped the oilskin and unfurled the crimson silk. The banner caught the light, a red flower over the faint outline of a silver trout. The men stared. One crossed himself and murmured a prayer. Jorah stepped closer, eyes wide. "By the gods, I've not seen that since I was a squire at the Trident, the river's heart." He looked to Alan. "If you bear that, boy, you carry more than any lord's seal. It was the sigil of defiance in the days of Robert's rebellion. The sight of it will rouse hearts, or break them anew." "Lady Catelyn charged me to keep it safe," Alan said, his voice steadying. "She believed the river still had strength left in it. I swore I'd see it done." Sir Jorah studied him a long moment, then gave a slow nod. "Then you've chosen a hard road, but not a hopeless one." He turned to his men. "We ride for White Harbor. The boy comes with us." They mounted, and Alan followed, his mare stumbling from exhaustion. The road wound through forest and fen, the smell of brine ever present. As night fell, they reached a small watchtower overlooking the mouth of the White Knife, the great river that flowed from the heart of the North. From its battlements, Alan saw lights far off, a city built of stone and snow, towers gleaming white beneath the stars. White Harbor, the last stronghold of the North's faith in the Starks. They rode through the gates at dawn. The streets were clean, cobbled, and guarded by soldiers in blue and white. The sigil of House Manderley, the merman with trident, fluttered from every wall. People watched them pass, eyes wary but curious. At last, they came to the steps of the merman's court, where Lord Wyman Manderley held audience. The hall was vast, its walls carved with scenes of sea and storm. A great man sat upon the dais, broad as a bear and pale as milk, his cheeks red with wine and winter air. Yet his eyes, blue and sharp, missed nothing. Sir Jorah bowed. "My lord, we bring a traveler from the Riverlands. He bears tidings, and a banner long thought lost." Lord Manderley's gaze fell upon Alan. "Speak, lad. What banner?" Alan stepped forward and unfurled the silk. The hall went still. The red flower blazed like blood in the torchlight, the trout beneath it faint but unmistakable. "The river's heart," Manderley murmured. "Gods preserve us. I have not seen it since Riverrun stood free." He rose slowly, his great bulk moving with surprising grace. "How came this to you?" Alan told him the tale once more, of his mother, of Sir Brynden Blackwood, of Catelyn Stark's charge, of the shipwreck that had brought him here. By the end, the hall was silent save for the crackle of the hearth. Manderley stroked his beard. "If what you say is true, then the river still flows with strength. But the north has bled deeply, and the wolves are scattered."
"The Lannisters hold the south," the phrase the trident. "Hope is a frail thing to bear across such waters." Alan lifted his head. "Hope is all that remains, my lord. The river's heart beats still, and if the north remembers, then perhaps it can beat for both." The lord's eyes gleamed. Bold words for one so young. He paused, then smiled faintly. "Very well. You will have my protection. The Lannisters' gold cannot buy every heart in this realm. Not yet." He turned to his guards. "Prepare a chamber for the boy. Feed him well, and see that the banner is kept safe in the chapel. The old gods will watch over it." As the servants led Alan away, Manderley's voice followed him through the hall. "Tell me, boy, what name did your mother give you?" He paused at the doorway. "Alan Flowers." The Lord chuckled softly. "Then remember it well, Alan Flowers of the Riverlands. Names have power, and you may yet need yours." That night, Alan stood at the window of his chamber, staring out over the frozen harbor. Ships lay at anchor, their masts swaying gently in the wind. Beyond the sea's edge, the horizon burned faintly red in the dying light. The river's heart was safe for now. But his journey was not ended. Somewhere beyond that horizon, the war still raged, and the blood of the Tullys still cried out for justice. He laid his hand upon the cold glass and whispered, "For the river's heart." And in the distance, though faint, he thought he heard the sound of water flowing, soft and eternal, as though the trident itself had not forgotten his vow. Snow fell upon White Harbor like drifting ash, soft and silent, settling upon rooftops, masts, and marble statues of merlings frozen in prayer. The sea beyond the walls was iron gray, the waves capped white, the air sharp with salt and cold. Alan stood upon the ramparts wrapped in a fur-lined cloak, watching the ships move slowly in the harbor below. He had been within Lord Manderley's walls for 12 days. The wounds of his journey were mended, his hunger eased, yet peace eluded him. He could feel it in the city itself, a tension, quiet but taut, like a bowstring drawn too long. The North had suffered, and though White Harbor stood proud, its heart was cautious. Hope was a luxury, and men here did not speak it aloud. Each day, Alan trained with the guards, rode along the shore, and listened to the murmur of rumor and tide. He heard tales of wolves gone missing, of Bolton banners rising over Winterfell, of the Lannisters tightening their grip upon the trident. The phrase, it was said, ruled Riverrun now, though their rule stank of blood. Yet still, he dreamed of the rivers, of the red silk fluttering above the trident, of a promise not yet broken. The banner lay sealed in Lord Manderley's chapel, guarded day and night, but Alan could not rest, knowing it lay there in silence, a relic when it should have been a call. One night, as snow whispered against the shutters, a servant came to his chamber bearing word. "The Lord requests your presence," the man said, bowing low. Alan followed him through the quiet corridors to the great hall. Lord Manderley sat by the hearth, the fire painting his round face in gold and shadow. Before him stood a tall figure cloaked in gray, his hood drawn low. "Alan," Manderley said, his voice calm, "there is one who would speak with you. He comes from the north, by way of the Wolf's Wood." The hooded man turned, and the firelight caught the edge of his face. He was lean, with streaks of white in his beard and eyes like cold steel. "I am Galbart Glover," the stranger said. "I rode from Deepwood Motte. We have heard whispers of you, of a boy from the Riverlands bearing the red flower banner." Alan's pulse quickened. "And what do your whispers say?" "That hope yet stirs among the rivers," Glover replied, "that the heart of the Tullys beats still, though the Freys call it dead." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "If this is true, the North must know. We fight for the same cause." Lord Manderley leaned forward. "House Manderley remembers its oaths. We have waited long for a sign. Perhaps this banner is the one we sought." Alan's hands clenched at his sides. "It is no crown, my lord. It is not meant to make kings." "No," Manderley said, his eyes glinting. "It is meant to remind men why they fight." The next day, under heavy sky, Alan stood once more in the chapel. The banner lay upon the altar, its silk gleaming faintly in the dim light. Glover and Manderley watched as he approached. With reverent hands, Alan unrolled it. The crimson petals shimmered, and beneath them, the faint outline of the silver trout glowed like moonlight upon still water. Manderley's voice broke the silence. "The river's heart once united the river lords when all seemed lost. If it rises again, it may do so once more, not through power, but through faith." Alan looked up at him. "And what would you have me do?" "Carry it," the Lord said simply. "The Freys believe they have crushed the Tully line. Let them see their mistake. Ride south, not as a lord's son, but as the river's voice. Find those who yet remember. House Blackwood, House Piper, the remnants of Riverrun's host. Show them that the heart still beats." The enormity of it struck him like cold water. He was no knight, no lord, only a squire with a promise. Yet the thought of riding south with the banner stirred something fierce within him, a purpose greater than fear. "I will go," he said quietly. Manderley smiled, a grim thing. "Then we will give you what aid we can. Horses, food, a companion who knows the wild roads. The Freys have long arms, but the gods favor those who remember their oaths." When Alan left the chapel, the air was heavy with snow. Glover walked beside him. "You know what you carry now," he said. "It will draw swords as surely as it draws hope. The Freys will want your head for this." Alan nodded. "They already do." That night, he slept little. He dreamt of the trident again, of dark water running red. In his dream, his mother stood on the riverbank, the banner in her hands. "The river remembers, Alan," she whispered, "even when men forget." He awoke before dawn. The city lay silent beneath a blanket of snow. The guards met him at the gate with a horse of fine northern stock and a cloak lined with fur. Galbart Glover rode beside him, his expression grim but resolute. Lord Manderley stood upon the battlements, his voice booming above the wind. "Ride swift, boy of the rivers. Let the red flower bloom once more." Alan bowed his head. "For the Riverlands," he said. They rode out into the falling snow. The world beyond White Harbor was white and endless, the horizon lost in mist. For days they followed frozen roads, crossed icy streams, and skirted villages abandoned to wolves and winter. At night, they made fire beneath pine and fir, sharing silence more than speech. Once, they passed a half-buried signpost bearing the words King's Road. It leaned crookedly, pointing south. Alan touched it as they rode by, feeling the rough grain beneath his glove. The road led them into lands scarred by war, burned farms, shattered keeps, trees hung with corpses. Yet here and there, they found signs of life. Small folk tending winter gardens, broken men who still called themselves Tully's men, river folk who whispered the old oaths by the fire. When Alan unfurled the banner before them, their eyes lit like kindled coals. "The river's heart," they murmured. "It lives." With each mile, Alan felt the weight of the banner grow lighter, its meaning clearer. It was not meant for lords or castles, but for those who still bled and tilled and endured. The river flowed through them all, and he was its messenger. On the 7th night, they reached the edge of the Green Fork. The water ran dark beneath the moon, swift even in winter. Glover halted his horse and looked across the river. "The Riverlands begin here," he said. "And your war with it?" Alan dismounted. He knelt upon the snowy bank and dipped his hand into the icy current. It bit his skin, but he did not flinch. "The river remembers," he whispered. When he rose, Glover watched him with something like pride. "Then let it see you worthy." They crossed at dawn, the banner tied high upon its pole. As Alan rode, the red flower rippled in the cold wind, bright against the gray sky. A spark of defiance carried southward into a land that had forgotten its heart. And far away, in the halls of the twins, a raven took wing. It bore a message sealed in blue wax and stamped with a pair of stone towers. "The river's heart rides again." Winter's breath lay heavy upon the Riverlands. The fields were pale with frost, the trees stripped bare, the air sharp as shattered glass. Alan rode south beside Galbart Glover, their horses leaving faint prints upon the snow-crusted ground. The red flower banner fluttered behind them, its crimson silk a wound against the white. The journey had grown perilous. Word had spread quickly, too quickly. In every village and ruined hold-fast they passed. Whispers followed them. "The river's heart rides again." Some took the words as hope, others as blasphemy. To the phrase, it was rebellion. To the Lannisters, it was treason. To the small folk, it was a promise that the river might yet wash away the blood that stained it. They kept to hidden roads where they could, avoiding the main fords. The Frey patrols grew more frequent, their banners gray and blue against the cold sky. Twice they hid in the woods while riders thundered past, the sound of hooves fading like ghosts. On the 5th night, they reached Fairmarket, or what was left of it. The once proud town lay half-burned, its streets littered with bones and ash. A few families huddled in the ruins, their eyes hollow, their fires weak. Alan could not pass them by. He dismounted and knelt beside an old woman tending a small flame. "Who did this?" he asked. "Freys," she rasped. "Came through a fortnight ago, said they were keeping order, took our food, our sons, our coin, left us to starve." Alan's jaw tightened. He unrolled the banner just enough for her to see. The crimson shimmer caught the firelight. Her breath caught. "The river's heart," she whispered. He nodded. Tell the others. The river remembers its children. No Frey's noose can choke it. When he rose, her eyes shone with tears. Bless you, lad, she said. Bless the river that sent you. By dawn, they had gone, leaving the small flame burning behind them. For many days they rode through broken country. They passed the ruins of Derry, where only crows nested now. They crossed the Red Fork by an old stone bridge, the waters below choked with ice. Everywhere they went, they found signs of the river's suffering, fields salted, wells poisoned, corpses strung from trees. Yet in the darkest places, they also found resistance. In the forests near Maidenpool, they met a band of outlaws who called themselves the Trident's Teeth. They were peasants and deserters, led by a one-eyed woman who had once served as a maid in River Run's kitchens. When Alan showed her the banner, she fell to her knees. "We thought it lost," she said, her voice trembling. "Lord Hoster swore it would rise again when the river bled. We've waited so long." "Then wait no more," Alan told her. "Gather who you can. Tell them to keep faith. The river runs still." By the time they left the woods, the Trident's Teeth had sworn to spread the word. Glover rode beside him, silent for a while. Then he said, "You've become something more than a messenger, boy. The river follows you now." Alan shook his head. "It's not me they follow. It's what the river stands for." "That may be so," Glover said, "but men always need a face for their hope." They rode on until the sun set red behind the hills. That night, they camped beside the ruins of an old sept. The walls had fallen, the statues shattered, but the altar remained. Alan built a small fire there, and Glover sat beside him sharpening his sword. "The Freys will not stay idle," the knight said. "By now they know you live." "I know," Alan said. "Let them come." Glover smiled faintly. "You speak like a lord." "I'm no lord," Alan said. "I'm a river's son." Snow fell thick that night, blanketing the world in silence. Alan dreamt of the Trident, its 3 forks flowing red, its waters whispering his name. In his dream, the red flower unfurled upon the water's surface, its petals glowing with fire. He reached for it, and when he woke, the world seemed brighter somehow. At dawn, they broke camp and continued west. Their path led them through the river road, toward River Run itself. Alan's heart quickened at the thought. The fortress of his childhood, the home he had never truly known, now lay in Frey hands. By midday, they reached a ridge overlooking the castle. The sight stole his breath. River Run's towers rose stark against the sky, its walls draped with the Frey banners, twin towers upon pale blue. Smoke rose from the chimneys, and the gates stood guarded by armored men. Alan clenched his fists. "They've defiled it." "Aye," Glover said, "but walls can be reclaimed. Stones remember their true masters." They camped in the woods beyond the river, watching the castle through the trees. That night, messengers came, scouts of the Trident's Teeth, bringing word that villages along the Red Fork had risen. Frey supply lines were cut, garrisons ambushed. The river's heart had become a whisper on every lip. Alan unrolled the banner by the firelight. The silk rippled softly, alive in the wind. "Tomorrow," he said, "we show them what it means." Glover nodded. "Tomorrow, then." When dawn came, the mist lay thick over the fields. The river glimmered faintly beneath it, and the air smelled of frost and smoke. Alan stood upon the bank, the banner held high. Around him gathered the small folk, the outlaws, the remnants of Tully men-at-arms, no great host, but hearts enough. Glover raised his sword. "For the river," he cried. "For the river," they echoed, Their voices rolling like thunder, they charged. Arrows flew, blades flashed. The Frey guards at the gate were taken unawares. Alan rode at the front, the red flower streaming above him. The world blurred into noise and motion, steel on steel, shouts, the smell of blood. When the gates fell, the river folk poured through. The battle was brief, but fierce. Alan fought like a man possessed, his dagger flashing, his cloak torn. By the time the sun burned through the mist, the Frey banners lay trampled in the mud. Alan climbed the battlements, the banner clutched in his hands. He tore down the twin towers and raised the red flower in their place. The wind caught it, unfurling it across the sky. Below, the people cheered, their voices rising like a storm. The river's heart had returned to River Run. Glover stood beside him, blood upon his blade but pride in his eyes. "It's begun," he said. Alan gazed out across the land, the rivers glinting in the sun, the smoke of battle lifting. "No," he said softly. "It's ended. The river remembers." He looked down at the banner, the red flower glowing against the morning light, and felt his mother's voice in the wind. "The heart still beats, my son." The river rolled on below, eternal and unbroken, carrying the song of its people to sea. And in that moment, as the wind lifted the banner high above River Run's towers, Alan Flowers understood that though kings might fall and empires fade, the river would always find its way. And so it did.